Welcome back to Briggs on Books, our international talk show where we talk to authors from all over the world. Today, all over North America and Canada have been most of our guests, but so many interesting topics. Now, I know most of our viewers, many of our viewers, maybe at least half of them, are authors themselves who've never yet been published. They're just working through the process, trying to figure out how to finish writing their book and then what the next step is. So, well, guess what? You're going to have a big couple of next steps after you finish writing. So I like to have authors on who have done it. And our next guest has done it several times, several books. Anthea Piscarik, welcome. Where are you, Anthea?
Hi, Mike. It's so great to be with you. It's actually early evening my time. I'm in Delaware on the East Coast. I'm about 2 hours south of New York City and 2 hours north of Washington, D.C.
Yeah. Well,
right at the heart of the metropolis.
I was showing off earlier all the things I knew about Delaware, but I know a new thing now that it's south of New York. I always thought it was north. So.
No.
Okay.
That would be Rhode Island, the smallest state. We're the second smallest state. The Diamond State is also one of our monikers, our tags. Yes.
The first state.
The first state.
Yeah.
The start of the nation. Yes.
Now, by the way, I'm going to pop your your latest book cover up here just to get us started. The Years in Between. What can you tell us about this book?
Yes, it's interesting. I have an identical twin who did not like the title, but it has quite relevance to the whole story. The Years in Between is regarding one of the characters in my very first book, Unearthing Christmas, who's a shadowy character in this book. She appears and disappears as a specter, like a ghost, but she has her own story. And that's why I called the second book The Years in Between, because she didn't get a chance to tell her whole story in Unearthing Christmas. And now, after tapping me on the shoulder as an author to tell me that she needed her story told, that's The Years in Between. And she's a photojournalist. And the story takes place from 1955 through 2019. It's basically, it's an homage to the late 20th century. She's a photojournalist who has survivor's guilt. She actually survives a horrific storm that wipes out her whole family. And she's sheltered in a bomb shelter decorated for Christmas, which is why the first book is called Unearthing Christmas. And she decides to test her own fate. And the way she does that is to put herself in harm's way throughout her life as a photojournalist. So we see her, Lori, in these unbelievably dangerous missions that she takes on. And it's just her journey, you know, with her survivor's guilt to figure out how to come back to some form of wholeness within herself. And she took me, the character, on a wild ride for her journey. And you know, it's amazing. I am more of a plotter than a pantser as a writer. And I had her whole story plotted out with her telling me every step of the way. I mean, there's room for me to be the creative writer, obviously. But I knew where her journey would end before I got there. And that was the beauty of it, to have that treasure map in hand and just be with her on that journey.
Can you give us an anecdote of some of the places, situations she put herself in as a photojournalist?
Yes, thank you. So, not to be a Forrest Gump type person where she's, you know, if you know how Forrest was, but she actually is at the JFK assassination. That was in college, where she is thrown into this assignment because it was close to Thanksgiving, and most of the journalists down in Boston were making plans, so she gets thrown into that, and she sees that through her camera, and it makes an indelible mark on her whole psyche, because she's already surviving the guilt of you know, surviving something in her own personal life. And then she takes on an assignment in Vietnam. And she's one of the very first female journalists. I did a lot of research all through the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s to make sure that everything that I mentioned when I put her in these situations was accurate. I did a lot of research. And she's also in the disco, I guess, the studio in 54 in New York, and is part of that whole scene in the 70s.
So it's kind of a journey through these historical events.
Yes, that's exactly right. And she's at the attempted assassination of John Paul II.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Wow.
but along with all of that, she's learning about herself. And the whole thing is she couldn't understand as a 14-year-old when this happened to her that God would allow such a sudden, horrible end to her family and that she would have survived. How could God do something to her? And she had to come back into understanding her own faith life and to getting back into that. Because, you know, there's a lot of people who lose family members and people very close to them very suddenly.
Right.
I know it is. I was in a very horrible car accident myself. I mean, I was lucky to survive it. But I know, I can't imagine what it's like to lose someone from one day to the next or 1 minute to the next. And I wanted to go on that journey with this character.
It sounds a little sad at points.
It is, but it's also a love story. There's a love story in there too because, and I don't want to give away all the plot points. It's sad, but it's healing as well. Because there is one character in this story that helps her along the way. Because we all have to deal with loss, Mike. I mean, whether it's the loss of a job or something even more, you know, earth-shattering or soul-piercing as the loss of a loved one. Mm-hmm. But there are people who help us along the way, and God puts people in our path to help us with that healing. I do believe that. And that's something that we learned, that there's so many people on this journey with her that help her with that healing. Yeah.
It has to have been the best job in the world, as I could imagine, going back and researching those periods from Kennedy to Vietnam to the Pope. I love to study those eras, and I'm anxious to read this book to just get another perspective or see it through somebody's eyes who wasn't even actually there. But
thank you. I was a news reporter. I've had very different jobs as a writer throughout my life, and as a news reporter, that was my favorite thing, was doing research.
Research, yeah.
I love it. I mean, I got to the point, Mike, where when I mentioned a certain day in London in February, 16th of 1963 or 60, I would actually look up the weather on that day.
You went that far, yeah.
I wanted to make sure if I mention anything, even if it's just one line or a couple of adjectives, I wanted to make sure if anyone goes back and researches what the weather was like on that day, that they'll get an accurate depiction in my book.
Now,
and it's there. I mean, you there's no reason why you can't do the research.
Yeah. I know exactly where I was on November 22nd, 1963, but I don't think you were around.
I know much about it because of the research. Yes, and I have an older sister who's at least a decade over, who was a young girl at the time and cried. I mean, JFK was, my mother was Irish. She was from Manchester, England. But there was, I mean, it was like the Kennedy family. It was like, I think they even had a photo. I think a lot of families had a photo of John F. Kennedy in their house.
Especially the Irish and the Catholics.
My mother was full-blooded Irish, but from Manchester, England. Yeah.
Now let's back up a minute, because I came here prepared to talk to you about the years in between.
Yes.
And you said the first book is very related.
Yes. So interesting. This book has its own history.
I have the cover on the screen, but I can't see the title. Tell us the title.
This book came to me in a dream. Mm-hmm. So the dream, very quickly, was poinsettia garland draped across clear dirt. And I thought, there's a story under that garland. And I wrote down the visual that I had, and it stayed with me. And so I did some research, and there was a family in Texas called the Christmas family, that was their last name, who lived in a bomb shelter in 1955 it was a government experiment to prove that you could survive a nuclear attack. Mm-hmm. And I love that time period in history, the 1950s, and I studied film history. So it's a very important, interesting time period. Yeah. So I thought that's what's under that poinsettia garland, is a bomb shelter decorated for Christmas. So the story is, back in 1955, a girl, a 14-year-old, is incensed that her mother buys an aluminum Christmas tree and ruins Christmas for her. So she convinces her dad to allow her to recreate Christmas in the bomb shelter he's so proud of. So 60 years later, another girl, 14-year-old, and her two friends discover the bomb shelter completely preserved the way it was in 1955. So it becomes this supernatural meeting ground between the two girls. And later on, we find out that that girl in 1955, who is the years in between character, is still alive 60 years later.
Amazing.
And the journey is for that girl, the modern day girl, to meet that girl. And she asks her, what about your life? And that's when we find out what her real journey was, from 1955 to 2019. The girl from the bomb shelter. But there's a supernatural, spiritual aspect to it as well. And the unfortunate thing with Unearthing Christmas right now is it will be republished. I have an agent looking for a new publisher. My original publisher, merged with another publisher who carried it for a year and a half and then depublished it. Even then, it was still an Amazon bestseller. Wow. After it was depublished, Unearthing Christmas was an Amazon bestseller in the young adult and teen Christian sci-fi subgenre. It's still available on Amazon. Unfortunately, only used copies that are selling for like $50, which is ridiculous. It's highway robbery. I can't wait for it to be republished so that it gets back to a reasonable price. It's slightly revised from the one that is now available with the used copies. So I can't wait for that. And I wrote a screenplay because I started Unearthing Christmas as a screenplay because I studied screenwriting in LA. And I'm still hopeful that the IP, the intellectual property, will be picked up. There is a producer who is interested. Since you're national, I would love Greta Gerwig to have any interest.
Oh, wouldn't that be
in
great? Yeah.
Wouldn't it be great? Because I love Lady Bird.
I love Lady Bird too.
She has such an understanding of a mother-daughter relationship, and also teenagers.
She gets that, yeah.
I mean, that movie just spelled it all out. So I know she's doing Chronicles of Narnia right now, but
wow.
My agent is hoping to send this book to her. We'll see what happens.
And she did Barbie too, right?
Oh, I know.
First of all, just listening to you talked me into ordering The Years in Between.
Thank you.
Then I changed my mind. I was going to order Unearthing Christmas first. But then when you said they're $50, I think I will go back to ordering The Years in Between right away because it's just intriguing. I love the subject and the time periods and how she shows up in these places. It's very, very great tools you use, devices you use.
And they are standalones, Mike. You don't have to read the first one to read the next. It's just that the Miriam Chronicles have characters in common, but each book is a standalone, and I need to make sure that people understand that as well.
Well, tell me about The Years in Between. What formats can we get it in?
All of the above. So it's a hardback for $23.95. Mm-hmm. The paperback is $14.95, and the ebook, they're all available on Amazon. But I'm also selling it on my my website. I have two websites. The author website is Anthea T. Piscarik.com, and I'm selling it there. Just trying it out. Free delivery, free mailing.
Whenever I could buy it directly from the author, I like to do that.
Great. Yeah. And, it's also a bookshop where, bookshop, along with Amazon does it, but bookshop does donate a portion of the sales to independent bookstores. That's nice. And I love that model. It's also Barnes & Noble. I just did a book signing at Barnes & Noble 2 months ago. So they carry it, and Kobo. But bookshop or from moi would be great. Yeah.
We're way past the amount of time they give me, but you have other careers. You're doing all kinds of things. Can you tell us a couple of them?
I can. Okay, real quickly. I'm also developing a short documentary about a blind couple who raised their own sighted twins. It's amazing. Chris, the mother, was a Paralympic. She was in the Barcelona Paralympics in 1992 as a swimmer. Gary went blind from the age of 14 to 19 slowly. Chris was born blind, and they have a girl and a boy, Sean and Kelly. And I can't wait. I'm meeting with another editor to get the film footage together. We want to get it to Sundance. It's an amazing story. It's called Love is Blind or The Unseen American Dream. They're the two working titles we're going between.
You read the news for the blind. You are a religious educator.
Yes, I did that. Yes, I right now I'm also a fully professed Dominican in the Dominican spirituality. But I was reading stories for the blind. Now they have another. I think they're streaming them. They're doing a different thing. But I love Gary and Chris. They are an amazing couple. They have a mural on their wall of sand dunes, beach scene. I mean, they don't even see. They have magnets, pictures on their refrigerator. They have framed pictures all around the wall, the bookcases. They're like the unseen American dream. They live a completely normal life that people would never believe. I mean, we don't understand it, but it's the only thing they don't do is drive.
I'm putting your book cover on the screen one more time, but last thoughts for our viewers about you, your books, or anything else you want to tell them?
So I'm an identical twin. It's a club that I was born into. I love the fact that I'm an identical twin. People say, what's it like? I said, what's it like not being a twin?
Yeah.
The other thing I want to do is encourage anyone who has a story, don't be dissuaded by all the books that are out there. Tell your story. Believe in yourself, but make sure you get it proofread and edited properly.
Yes.
That is very important. And I just fulfill all of your dreams. Gary and Chris have a family. That was their dream, and they're blind. So fulfill your dreams.
Live your dream. Thank you, Anthea. You're an inspiration. I'm inspired by you, and I can't wait to get the book. And I hope you will come back on the show sometime soon.
With Greta Gerwig.
Yeah, there you go. I hope she's watching. We are international. We'll be back with more authors right after this.
Thank you.